Okay, so we are in Harrison Hot Springs in British Columbia. And Harrison Hot Springs is one of the few places in Canada where you can have pretty guaranteed Bigfoot sightings. Kind of a short little guy. Okay, so in the town of Harrison Hot Springs, just based off of Google Maps alone, I know that there are at least 4 locations where we can find some artistic representation of the Sasquatch. And that was one over there, that little statue. We're kind of going on a morning scavenger hunt until the visitor center and museum opens at 10 o'clock. So we've got a couple of hours to kill. So we're going to kill about half an hour to an hour searching for these Bigfoot throughout the town of Harrison Hot Springs. Not too far from this guy over here, across the street, is I think one for sale. $850, Bigfoot. Okay. I found a little bonus Bigfoot there on the sign. And this right here will tell us kind of, I guess this is what we're looking for. We're looking for this guy here, but in giant mode. And so we're trying to see what it says here. So I think it has to be stated as we walk through this beautiful area by the lake here. Even though there's more beauty, there's more majesty to this northern environment. It's that much harder to endure in the winter. I mean, we have to think about the colder temperatures. More snow, more ice. I mean, Canada as a whole seems to be shutting down a lot of their parks and outdoor areas, which would imply that the community and tourists seeking to experience those areas in the off-season would be at too much of a risk to deal with the mudslides, with the intense 0-degree temperatures and other harsh elements like precipitation and excessive ice. So, keeping in mind, I mean, this is an environment where an unclassified species of primate is supposed to live, and to be in such an extreme cold habitat, I mean, it makes you wonder. So I've been thinking about various species of primate and where they're said to roam. And I mean, most ape species, most monkey species for that matter, primates in general, traditionally come out of warmer environments, tropical, in some cases in Africa. You don't necessarily have them coming out of a jungle, but at least coming out of savanna, warmer temperature savannas. I mean, a lot of monkey species live south of the equator. I mean, think of all the New World monkeys in Central and South America. And the other thing that I'm thinking about is the great apes in Africa. You know, with the exception of human beings who have dominated just about every landscape, and we've done so because we can alter our habitat. We can build, we can put a box somewhere in the Arctic that doesn't have Arctic conditions. With the exception of human beings who make an exception to every rule in nature, gorillas, orangutans, bonobos, chimpanzees, even gibbons, you know, all species of ape that you can think of, they don't live in temperate, cold environments. This would be a hard place to live for any primate, I think. Unless we can find something that would present an alternative, that could be a subsistence, or that could be if we could find something that could present an alternative that becomes an X factor for an animal's survival, then maybe we can reconsider. But as far as I know, apes are pretty tropical things. Or even in temperate situations, there's still a threshold that before it becomes too cold. You can see the steam coming out from there. That's not smoke, that's not pollution, that's the heat from the hot springs. And we're going to walk down there in just a second here, get a closer look at those. But this right here is another Bigfoot that we were looking for. Another Sasquatch. Very tribal looking. Very cool. So this is where the hot spring comes from. I can feel warmth kind of just by putting my hand up against here. It's not, I don't know how warm it really is, but it's steaming, so it's got to be at least 70 degrees. Okay, so it says that the water is 140 degrees and will cause severe burns from here. It kind of smells like sulfur where I'm standing right now. This is St. Alice's Well, named after Alice Douglas, who was the daughter of the British Columbia Governor James Douglas. These were first discovered by 3 miners returning by canoe from the Caribou gold fields in 1858. And the First Nations people knew of these for a long time. They called them Wam-Chuck. And the spring was believed to be a place of supernatural origin and of great benefit to those who drank the water. (145 Fahrenheit). Hot springs water from the cold lake water. Oh, so it used to be blended. So they separated the hot springs from the lake because it used to flow directly into the lake. Used to be a bathhouse for 50 guests at a time, which was destroyed in a fire back in 1905 and was never rebuilt. So, a couple things is, I've been to towns that have had hot springs since the Revolutionary War period, and they're still offering hot spring baths to people today. So the fact that this area got the ball rolling for about 40, 50 years or so, and then it was destroyed in a fire which was never rebuilt. I mean, that kind of put a halt to development, which could have been more substantial had the springs been up and running and continued to be an ongoing tourist attraction. It's cool that you still have the natural hot springs here that you could observe, but it does kind of limit it if people can't access the water. But so what I'm saying is this could be a lot more busy area. There could be a lot more subsequent resorts and destinations in and around these mountains. But because of that hot spring burning down over 110 years ago, it becomes more difficult to expand upon the tourism. And so I feel like this town of Hot Springs maybe has done well for itself. But what about the other outlying communities? And what about the private properties in between here and there? So maybe the fire was a saving grace for the residents of this area, not the local town residents, but the natural residents, the animals. Maybe less development has kept their populations in healthy abundance because tourists haven't flocked in the droves that they would have had a hot spring been accessible to the public and baths were going on today. Now, there might have been some offshoots. There might be more hot springs that people could take advantage of here. But as far as I know, this big one, the historical one, well, it's not around anymore. It hasn't been around for 100 years. And that might have made all the difference for the fish, and the deer, the bear, and maybe Bigfoot. Now, the other thing that I would like you to consider is we were just talking about trying to find an X factor, something that would make an ape, which is more conditioned to warm environments, have an easier time tolerating these temperate, with a limitation of evolution. You can only change and develop over so many years at such a rate before it becomes too problematic, too stressful, and some animals just can't change with the times fast enough. And that's why you have a lot of extinction in and around climate change and when animals venture too far out of their range. But an X factor would kind of help alleviate some of that stress and disorder as you come in contact and conflict with a different environment. And so sure, apes don't do well in the cold, but we know that gorillas, they have a thick, coarse hair, and they can survive in some snowy-like conditions at some of the higher elevations in the mountains in Africa. And then we also know that we've been able to construct our own environments and create shelters that can help guard us from the environments. We've talked a lot about Bigfoot and a possible relationship between caves and lava tubes and how it could get out of the elements. We've talked about the insulating properties of thick conifer groves and how something can run in there and get out of the elements if it gets into a tight network of conifer trees to shield it from the wind. But one thing we haven't talked about yet are hot springs. So hot springs are this saving grace. Like we just read, 140 degrees of warm temperature nestled in what could very well be a negative 20 degree environment. That's the difference of living and dying, You get to that sweet spot in between 140 and negative 20, and you could survive. Now let's paint a picture of something that's exposed and it's cold and it's been an unbroken week of just below zero weather. Well, the hot springs could create a haven. And just like a natural spa, a Sasquatch could jump in. And it sounds kind of amusing, right? Bigfoot on vacation. But we know of examples in nature that exist already. I know you've seen them on documentaries before. They're usually pretty entertaining to watch. The way they groom each other, the way they sit back in these hot springs. But Asian snow macaques are a perfect example of a primate using hot springs. And sure, they don't rely on them exclusively. Their species have been living in those mountains for thousands of, 10,000s of years. And yet, a small population has learned to take advantage, to take some of the pressure and stress off of it. And so what happens is a certain population can exist in that area with little competition because the cold is so extreme. Other populations that are unaware of the hot springs won't come into that area and present competition. You know, other animals that are deterred by the cold would leave an abundance of food in that area. And then any resident population that knows about the springs, that survives off of staying warm at the springs, it's less of a do or die situation, and they're complacent in that region, taking advantage of the resources and taking advantage of the hot springs. And by that speculation, you know, they have all the time in the world to grow and develop and build upon their social structures, come up with further alternative survival strategies, and in the long run could be quite fortuitous for the animal or population of animals that dwell in an area with such an X factor. So yeah, hot springs would be all they really need. We have a good example of the macaques and their ability to survive under those conditions because of hot springs, and who knows what else could be taking advantage of nice hot natural bath water. Oh wait, got another Bigfoot, and he's angry and he's gonna throw a rock because you didn't stay at the Springs RV Resort. What's with all the sit-downs with Bigfoot? I don't know you, man. Like, you're just gonna put your arm around me like we're sweethearts? This is a little sketch, man. I don't know if I'm coming back to this tourist community. Join me next time as I venture deeper into the mountains of British Columbia, to a park that's so well known for its Bigfoot sightings, they named the park Sasquatch Provincial Park.